Right, good morning all. Back to Gemarah Sanhedrin. David Marks is back with us, so we can rely on his expertise. You were mentioned in dispatches that last week, David. We needed you, and you weren't around, but we somehow or other managed. But it wasn't easy, so we're glad to see you back, and we're glad to see you back, Julia, as well. We've missed you. So here we go. We're back into Sanhedrin, and we're at a very interesting point. Let me get it up on the screen straight away. And we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger last week. We were talking about the prophecy of two gentlemen by the name of Eldad and Medad. Okay, remember them?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to remind us where we're holding in Sefer Bamidbar, and I'll show you the screen now. You should be able to see Bamidbar now. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So remember, just to recap, this was where the people moaned that they wanted meat. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I can't handle you lot on my own. God said, okay, I'll give you some helpers. I'll give you get together to me 70 elders, and I'll put the spirit of prophecy upon them. And we got to this point over here. Verse 25 on the screen, Jeffrey.
The Lord descended in a cloud and spoke to him, and he increased some of the spirit that was on him and bestowed it on the 70 elders. And when the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but they did not continue. Now, two men remained in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the name of the second was Medad, and the Spirit rested upon them. They were among those written, but they did not go out to the tent, but prophesied in the camp.
Okay, let's stop there. Now, what we were talking about in this Gemara was how did we get to this whole business? Well, we got to this whole business because we were asking, how did Moshe choose the 70 elders? And because we had a problem. If he chose 6 from each tribe, he would have 72. So he's got 2 over. What's he going to do with them? And if he chose 5 from each tribe, he'd have 60. And so he'd be 10 short. And if he chose 5 from some and 6 from another tribe, then there'd be a broigus between the tribes. So what was he to do? So the Gemara tells us, and this is what we learned a week or two ago, that he devised a system of lots, whereby he got 72 pieces of whatever, papyrus or pottery or whatever they were writing on in those days. And on 70 of them, he wrote the word elder, and on 2 of them, he left it blank. And the idea was that he chose 6 people from each tribe, making 72. And each of those 72 were to come and put their hand in the box being called a kalpi, which is the same word that we use for a ballot box today here in Israel. So they were to put their hand in the kalpi and pull out their piece of paper, let's say. And on it was written elder, they were the elder. And if they picked out a blank, then they were not chosen to be one of the elders. Now, as the pasuk that Jeffrey just read out to us said, there were 2 men who remained in the camp. And the Gemara spoke about, and we did this last week, why did they stay in the camp? Well, the first opinion was that they felt that they were not worthy to be elders. And so when the 72 people came forward to pick out their lots out of the box, they didn't step forward because they said, we're not fitting to be elders. We are bound to pick out the blank, and it will be embarrassing for us. We're just not fitting. We don't feel that we're fitting to be elders. And so presumably, because they never showed up, they never did the lottery. The Gemara goes on to tell us a bit later on that actually, had they turned up, they would have got elder state, which means that 2 of the elders actually got in there by default because they would have been the ones that picked out the blanks. But that's a side issue. At the moment, the Gemara is interested in these two gentlemen, Eldad and Medad. And what we did last week was we skipped a couple of paragraphs. We skipped the paragraphs that are on the page here, because this was a little standalone, and I wanted to do this separately. And I asked you at the end of last week if anybody knew what the prophecy was that Eldad and Medad were doing. And I said, don't look on in the Gemarah and don't read the translation if you don't want a spoiler. So this Gemarah is asking us, what was it that they were prophesying about? Because the pasuk does not tell us that. If we go back to the verse, it just says, now 2 men remained in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, and the name of the second was Medad, and the Spirit rested upon them. They were among those written, but they did not go out to the tent, but they prophesied in the camp. Right. Now, verse 27 on the screen, Jeffrey, please.
The lad ran and told Moses, saying, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' servant from his youth, answered and said, Moses, my master, imprison them. Moses said to him, are you zealous for my sake? If only all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would bestow his Spirit upon them. Okay, stop there.
So we're not told what they were prophesying about, but whatever it was, it upset Yehoshua. Joshua, the son of Nun, Yeshua bin Nun, Moshe's servant from his youth, said to Moshe, my master. Okay, it says here, imprison them, but the word in Hebrew is kelaem, and we'll come to that in a minute. He says, my master, imprison them. So whatever it was that they were doing and saying, Yehoshua was not happy with it. And Moshe says to him, calm down, Yehoshua. Take it easy. Are you zealous for my sake? It's fine. Halavai. All the Lord's people should be prophets. It's fine. Let HaKadosh Baruch Hu bestow their Spirit on them. Let them prophesy. Don't get upset. Chill. And we're not told what it was that they were prophesying. We're not told what it was that upset Yehoshua. And we're not told why Moshe was not bothered by it. So the Gemarah now asks us those questions. What is going on in these psukim? Let's go back and have a look at the Gemarah.
Johnny, would it not be possible if the two of them didn't turn up and they had the lots, then they could have ended up with 68? Because two other people could have drawn blanks.
Well, they would have done had they done the lottery, because but I suspect when they didn't turn up, Moshe did a roll call. He said, oh, well, we've only got 70, so we don't need to do the ballot. You're all there to your 70. And I assume, I mean, this is all a bit speculative, but if I was Moshe and I had 72 people and I would devise this lottery system and then only 70 turned up, my natural reaction will be to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's done it for me. I don't need to do the lottery now, because for some unknown reason, 2 people haven't turned up. These must be the 70 that God wants to be the prophets, even though that actually wasn't the case according to the Gemarah. And I imagine in that scenario, he would not have done the lottery because there's no point. That would be the logical way to do it. Whether that happened or not, I don't know. So let's have a look at the Gemarah. We're on page 90 if you're following in the Steinsaltz. Top of the page here on the screen. Uma nevuah nit naba'u. And what was this prophecy that they were prophesying? This is the first opinion. We're going to get 3 opinions as to what it was. There's a little N over here in the Steinsaltz, which takes us to the notes. Let's have a look what it says. The Maharsha explains that all 3 opinions derive from the content of the prophecy, from a hint based on the expression in the camp. Okay, we're going to come back to that. So here we go again. What was it that they said? First opinion, Amru, they said, Moshe met, Yehoshua machnis et Yisrael la'aretz. Now, there is a bad translation in the Steinsaltz, I'm sorry to say. Who would like to translate that, what I've just read out, accurately? Without looking at the bad translation in Steinsaltz. Let's take it word by word. Moshe met. What does that mean?
Moshe is dead.
Moshe is dead in the present tense, correct. Yehoshua machnis et Yisrael la'aretz. Joshua machnis. What's that word mean?
And entered, is it?
It's a causative form of the word enter, yes. What's the word to the entrance to your house or your block of flats? It's called knisa, is the entrance. So this is machnis, it's a causative form. You cause something to enter. So Yehoshua machnis et Yisrael la'aretz. Yehoshua will cause Israel to enter. In other words, will bring in Israel to the land. How does Steinsaltz translate it? Will bring. It's not correct. It's the present tense. Okay? Machnis is the present tense. And I think it's quite important that we translate this accurately. Because they were prophesying and they said, according to this opinion, Moshe is dead, Joshua is bringing the people into the land. Now, let's stop there. And now you can understand why Joshua was getting upset. Because they have said something sacrilegious. They have said Moshe is dead. Well, quite clearly he isn't, because he stood there talking to Joshua. So it's a very big difference to say Moshe is dead and Joshua is now the leader and he's bringing the people into the land, to saying that sometime in the future Moshe will die and Joshua will take over as leader and will bring the people into the land. There are two very, very different statements there. I hope you would agree with that. I think it's very important that we translate this accurately, because I think that tells us why Joshua got upset. Joshua is saying this must be a false prophecy, because not true. Moshe is not dead. Moshe is very much alive. I am not the leader, and I am not bringing at this moment the people into the land. And so you can understand from this why Joshua got upset. Moshe's response was, take it easy, chill. And what does he say exactly? Let's go back to the words. He said, verse 29, Jeffrey.
Moses said to him, are you zealous for my sake? If only all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would bestow his spirit upon them.
That makes sense now. We understand why Moshe said, are you upset for me? Why are you upset for me? I'm not upset. Take it easy. Because the Eldad and Medad, according to this opinion, were prophesying and saying that Moshe is dead and Joshua is taking over.
Who said that they said Moshe met?
This is the opinion of the Gemarah.
Not just the opinion.
This is the Tanakama of the Gemarah. This is the first opinion. Does it tell us who it said it? I'm not sure. Let's have a look. No, it doesn't say. It's just an unknown Tana or Amorah probably says this. This is the first opinion, that this is what Eldad and Medad were saying. It's entirely the opinion of this person. It's not written in the Torah what they said. That's the whole point of this Gemarah, is expanding on what they said. Now this is very famous. How many of you had heard that was what Eldad and Medad were prophesying? Me, I'd heard that. David had heard that. Johnny, you must have, Rebbe Balkin probably taught you. You might have forgotten, but I'm sure that Rebbe Balkin would have told you that, because it's a very famous, a very famous piece of Gemarah. I'll be honest, I didn't know it came from here. I didn't know this was the source of it. I knew that was the opinion, as far as I knew. That was the only opinion. And I didn't know this Gemarah until we came to learn it. But I'd certainly heard that was the opinion, that was what Eldad and Medad were saying. That's why Yeshua got upset, because Yeshua was humble and didn't want to hear that his master even was going to die. Never mind, was already dead, etc. So that's
This is the present tense, so it's not prophesying; it's something that's happened.
Well, yeah, it's something that is happening.
Dead. Yeah. He's not going to die. They said he's dead. It's a statement, not a prophecy.
It's a statement. Yeah, it's not a prophecy of the future as we understand the word prophecy. Now, let's have a look at the next opinion as to what Eldad and Medad were saying. We're not told who said the first opinion. We are told who said the second opinion. Abba Chanin Omer Mishum Rebbe Eliezer. Abba Chanin says in the name of Rebbe Eliezer, Al Iske Slav Hein Mit Nabein. Ali Slav, Ali Slav. Now, if we go back to the Sukkim, we said already that this was the issue of the meat. The people wanted meat. Moshe says, I can't give them meat. God says, I'll give you 70 elders to help you. And you know what? I'll give them that much meat. It'll be coming out of their nostrils. They'll be sick to death of it. So, Jeffrey's already read out 29. And then so read out 30 and 31 and 2, please.
Then Moses entered the camp, he and the elders of Israel. A wind went forth from the Lord and swept quails from the sea and spread them over the camp about 1 day's journey this way and 1 day's journey that way around the camp, about 2 cubits above the ground.
Stop there for a sec. There were that many quails. How far can you walk in a day? The Gemarah tells us this in some Gemarah. Anybody know how far you can walk in a day? David, do you know how far Gemarah says you can walk in a day? $20 mil, I think. 20 mil, which is a mil is a measurement. It's just under a kilometer, I think. It's in the back of my mind somewhere that there is a figure that you can walk, and it's the back of my mind that it's about 20 mil. Anyway, it's a long way. A day's walk back in the day when they were used to walking, not like us lazy folk who can't walk from A to B. These people were used to walking. It's a long way. So you had around the circumference, you had a day's walk circumference of quails piled 2 cubits. How far is 2 cubits? A cubit's about 18 inches. So 3 foot off the ground for a circumference of 20 kilometers, 10 kilometers even, all around the camp. Billions of quails. I mean, just the number you can't imagine. Quails are only little, by the way. Have anybody ever seen a quail?
At the 11th plague.
Yeah, they're tiny little things. They're like small pigeons. But there were millions of them. I mean, we don't think about this. They were spread a day's journey all around the camp. Now, verse 32 tells you how many they gathered, Jeffrey. Verse 32.
The people rose up all that day and all night and the next day and gathered the quails. Even the one who gathered the least collected 10 heaps. They spread them around the camp in piles.
So they all went out and they collected these quails, and they were, imagine you were in your house and suddenly outside you saw raining down from the sky 100 shekel notes. What would you do? You'd run outside and you'd go and gather up as many as you possibly could. and you'd bring them into your place and you'd make big piles of it. Well, that's what they did. They rose up all day, all night, and the next day they didn't even go to bed. And they were gathering these quails, and the one who gathered the least had 10 heaps. We're not told how high the heaps are, but there must have been millions of them, millions of these quails. And what did that tell you about the people? It told you that they were capping as much as they could, as quickly as they could. Not a nice character trait. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not happy with them. Have a look at verse 33 onwards, Jeffrey.
The meat was still between their teeth. It was not yet finished, and the anger of the Lord flared against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very mighty blow. He named that place Kivrot Hata'avah, graves of craving, for there they buried the people who craved.
Okay, so this is the name of the place, Kivrot Hata'avah, the burial places of Ta'avah, meaning desire, and it's Ta'avah is usually a negative when it's used in this way. Anyway, it's a negative thing. It was the place where the people who were craving meat, where they met their end. Those biblical critics who want to always ascribe natural causes to miraculous events say that the reason that they all died was because the meat was off, and they ate all this meat which was not preserved properly or cooked properly or what have you, and they all died of food poisoning. The Torah tells us that this was HaKadosh Baruch Hu getting angry that they had been behaved in such a bad manner. First of all, demanding meat, and secondly, and I think probably more so, I think, to demand meat is not a great thing, but it's an understandable human desire. If you've been eating something that tastes of honey and wafers for the last few months, and that's all you've had, to have a bit of meat, it's not an unreasonable request. But it was the way they did it, and then specifically the way they went and chapped it like greedy animals, just piling these things up. Kadosh Baruch Hu said that's not the way to behave, and he punished them accordingly. So that was what came immediately after we read of what Eldad and Medad were prophesying, which brings us to the second opinion. The second opinion in the Gemara, Abba Chanin says in the name of Rebbe Eliezer, Al Iske Slav Hein Mitnabim. They were prophesying about the issue, the business of the quails, and they said their prophecy was not Moshe's dead and Yeshua's now going to be taking us into the land. Their prophecy was Ali Slav. What does Ali mean? From the word Aliyah, go up. Arise, Slav. Arise, quail. Arise, quail. And so this opinion of Abba Chanin in the name of Rebbe Eliezer is that their prophecy was that the quail should arise. What is the obvious problem with that explanation?
They asked for the quail.
Well, they asked for meat, yes, but what's the obvious problem with that explanation of what they were prophesying? Let's go back to the Psukim and see what happens. Where they made their prophecy, and then Yehoshua, verse 28, Jeffrey.
Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' servant from his youth, answered and said, Moses, my master, imprison them.
Okay, stop there. Well, why would he say that? What have they done wrong? Why would Joshua go to Moshe and say, put them in prison because they're saying such terrible things, which is arise, quail, arise, quail? Why is that so terrible? Why should they be put in prison for that?
But that may not be the reason that he suggests that they be put in prison. The reason he suggests that they be imprisoned is that they didn't turn up. In other words, they rejected Moshe's requirement to come and be part of the lottery.
Okay, hold that thought, because we asked the question a little bit later in the Gemarah, and that isn't one of the answers of the Gemarah, actually, but I think it's a good answer, and we'll discuss it in a bit more detail later on. So that's a question against that if we say that that's what they were prophesying, and if we say, as we said with the previous opinion, that the reason that Joshua said put them in prison was because of not because they didn't show up, as you've said, Julia, but because of the content of their prophecy, there seems to be a non sequitur here. Arise, quail is not something that would get them into prison. So we have to think of another reason that would get them into prison, and Julia's answer is a good answer. We'll come back to it. So that's the second opinion. We've got a third opinion as to what Eldad and Medad were prophesying. Over here, Rav Nachman says, Al iskei Gog umagog hayu mitnabein. And they were prophesying about the matter of Gog and Magog. Anybody know what Gog and Magog are, or who, or what they are? You heard of them, Johnny? Gog and Magog?
They were also prophets.
Yeah.
Were they prophets? I don't think they were prophets, no. Where have you heard about Gog and Magog?
Well, this to do with Sodom.
No, but there's a bit of a connection, not with Sodom itself, but there's a bit of a connection. I'll tell you where you've heard it. You've heard it every year, at least once every year. You have followed it in the Chumash or in the Tanakh very carefully. It's a Haftorah. David will tell us where it's the Haftorah from, please, David.
Shabbos Chol HaMoed Sukkos.
Correct. Shabbat Chol HaMoed Sukkot. It is the Haftorah. It's the war of Gog and Magog. It's from the book of Yechezkel, and you may have heard of it in your non-Jewish schools, because the Christians have adopted this idea of Gog and Magog as a little bit of their own. It's re-quoted in their so-called New Testament, and it describes events that will happen. It's a prophecy of events that will happen, Ba'acharit Hayamim, which literally means at the end of days. So it's a prophecy about what's going to happen just before Mashiach comes. And the story in Yechezkel tells us that there's going to be this war, a war to end all wars. It's going to be like, an apocalypse. And this is where the word apocalypse comes from. This is where the Christians take this idea that there will be an apocalyptic war at the end of days. And there have been many people who have tried to fit this prophecy of Gog and Magog with the First World War, the Second World War, Hiroshima, etc., etc. And this is what they were saying, according to Rav Nachman. They were prophesying the war of Gog and Magog. Let's take a look at the psukim in Sefer Yechezkel, the book of Ezekiel. It's in chapter 38. And you have to understand Yechezkel, where he's coming. Yechezkel had the most incredible visions. Yechezkel must have been taking LSD or some other kind of hallucinogenic material, because the things that he describes are really fantastic in its true sense of the word, fantastic. And so this is what he was talking about. The background is that Hashem will bring back the Jewish people, the Israelites, back to Jerusalem. after they have been expelled. And then there will be this almighty war. Now, what's really interesting is that there has been a change in the way this Gog and Magog business has been described over the centuries. Because here in Yecheskel, which is over here, we describe this person called Gog, and Magog is the place where he comes from. But over the centuries, it's got changed into that Magog is another person. But the actual original Psukim talks about Gog from Magog. Trying to just find you the Psukim exactly where it is. There it is. Jeffrey, if you're with us. Jeffrey, are you here?
Yeah.
On the screen, please. Verse 2.
Son of man, set your face toward Gog, toward the land of Magog, the prince, the head of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy concerning him.
Okay, stop there. So you can see in the Hebrew it says, turn your face El Gog, Eretz HaMagog, Gog from the land of Magog. Over the centuries, and largely because of the Christian approach to this, it's got changed into not from Gog from the land of Magog into Gog and Magog, as if it was two different people. But in the original Yecheskel, it's not that. Now you go on to read this very phantasmagorical prophecy, and it talks about this war that will be this terrible war in the time of this, and then it goes on to say this, verse 17. After the prophecy, it says this:
So said the Lord God, are you he about whom I spoke in ancient days through my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days many years ago, to bring you upon them? Okay, so after the prophecy, Hashem says, and he's talking, as it were, to Gog, and he says, are you the Gog about whom I spoke a long time ago through my servants, the prophets of Israel, who prophesied in those days many years ago to bring you, i.e. Gog, upon them? You can see from this pasuk that Rav Nachman is saying, God says, are you the Gog that my servants years ago, the prophets of Israel, prophesied? Now Rav Nachman says that Hashem is here referring to Eldad and Medad. When he says, are you the Gog that my prophets years ago prophesied, he's referring to Eldad and Medad as the prophets who prophesied years ago. Okay, Julia's not impressed by that, but I'm going to make you impressed in a second, Julia. So hang on. Okay, so look at the Gemarah again. The Gemarah says, Shenema, the Gemarah quotes our pasuk. Shanim lahavi otcha alehem. That's the pasuk I just said. Are you the one about whom my servants, the prophets of Israel, prophesied in those days for many years ago? What's the word for years? Many years ago. What's the word for years? Shana.
Shana is a year. What's the plural?
Shanim.
Shanim. There it is on the screen for you. I'm just circling it with my thingy.
Yeah.
Can you see that? Oh, what's going on here? Okay, Shanim, years. And then the Gemarah says this: Al tikrei Shanim. Do not read the word as Shanim, years. Remember, in the Tanakh, there's no vowels. You've just got the letters. You've got the letters Shin, Nun, Yud, final men. So the Gemara says, don't read the word as shanim, read the word as shanayim, which means
2 years.
two. Now are you more impressed, Julia?
It means, you're right, I am much more impressed, because it was a question I was going to ask you, is that was it usual for two prophets at the same time to come up with identical prophecies?
No, is the answer. No, because there is actually a Gemarah that says, that asks the question, actually, how come we need to have different prophets telling us the same thing? You find Yirmiyahu saying the same thing as Yeshayahu, you see, and the answer that the Gemara gives is because each prophet does it in their own style and in their own way. So when two of them say exactly the same thing, you're absolutely right. It is an unusual event. And so now you can understand why Rav Nachman is saying this. Rather clever of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman has pulled out this pasuk out of his back pocket. He's pulled out this pasuk from Yecheskel, which of course we all knew, didn't we? Because we've read it on Cholamod Sukkos every year. And Rav Nachman has said, don't read the word as shanim, read the word as shnayim. And then he goes on to say, Ve'ezo hein shnayim neviim shenit nababu beperek echad nevuah achad. Who were the only two prophets who said one prophecy, the same prophecy at the same time? There was only one pair, Havei Omer Eldad Medad. You have to say that was Eldad and Medad. So now Julia is much happier than she was a few minutes ago, because we have shown that Rav Nachman has not just made all this up. It's really rather clever that he is using this play on words, if you like, this homiletical explanation of the letters Shin Nun Yud Mem. And he says that what they were prophesying was about Gog and Magog. We still have the difficulty that we had before, which is, why did Yoshua get so upset? And why did Moshe say, why are you getting upset on my behalf? The only prophecy that fits that directly, the content, is the first one, which was the one that said Moshe's dead and Joshua is already leading the people into the land. But we do have three different opinions, even though I only knew one. I'm going to ask David. David, were you aware of the other two? Have you ever learned this Gemara before, or ever heard the other two?
I have learned it many years ago, and I'd forgotten these two reasons.
Yeah, because the first one is really the one that's taken, I don't know, the imagination, if you like. That's the one that everybody quotes. It's the one you're taught in Cheder. It's the one that, you know, is really been accepted. So there you are. There's a Gemara there that gives us.
I'm still troubled by what you're troubled about, which is the tense of Moshe met Yoshua Machnis. And it's not just Rav Steinsaltz translating it that way, it's Art Scroll as well. And I'm just thinking that there are obviously many, many examples, possibly more in post-biblical Hebrew, where the present tense is used for the future.
Okay, let's accept that's the case. But why not? Why not?
That's the interpretation that you and I probably know, that it was a prophecy that Moshe would die and Yehoshua would take his place, and that was part of the rebellion.
Well, that's right. And that's why Yehoshua didn't, and we were taught, weren't we, that this was Yehoshua being very humble, etc. Now, if you translate it in the future tense, as you are suggesting that you can use the present tense for the future tense, and I'll accept that for a second, but if you're going to translate it like that, then that reflects on Yehoshua even greater, doesn't it? Because he's saying, I don't even want to hear what's going to happen in the future. And I think that is why they translate it as the future tense. However, I think that my question is a valid question, because they could quite easily, the Gemarah quite easily could have said, Moshe Yamut, Moshe will die, Yoshua Yachnis et Israel, and use the future tense. Why use the present tense? Even if you say, well, you can translate that as a future. Why introduce that safek? Why introduce that doubt? The Gemarah is by definition an extremely analytical document. It's precise.
It's funny, I can't see any of the commentators raising this issue.
Me neither, and that's why it's going in Chidushei Poleg. Okay, it's my interpretation, and I think that it doesn't reflect. I mean, it still reflects well on Yeshua, but it doesn't give us that extra level of praise of Yeshua about his humility for the future. It's a more understandable reaction from Yeshua to say, they're rebelling against you, Moshe. They're not saying you're going to die. We know you're going to die. You know, you're 120 years old. Actually, he wasn't by this stage. He was only 80 odd. This is before the Meraglim. But he's eventually going to die, and somebody's got to take over. He's not going to live forever. So it's not,
But by the way, you're probably aware of the Rashi, who identifies the Na'ar that tells Moshe about Eldad and Medad being Moshe son Gershom.
Yeah. And of course, that's
which makes it, even more disturbing.
Yeah, and I think that if you let's throw that right in now. Rashi says that this was Moshe's son. Now, who would Moshe want? Who did Moshe want to take over from Moshe?
Yeah,
his son. Why did he want that? Why did he even expect it? Who took over from Aaron? Okay. When Aaron died, his son, right? Moshe is told later on, when he's about to die, the end of Sefer Bamidbar, he's told, Moshe, your time's up. Go up to Har Nevo. You're going to die. And what does Moshe say? You need to appoint a leader. And Rashi there is consistent, because Rashi says there, if I'm not mistaken, that Moshe wanted Gershom to take over. And Hashem says, you need a man who's full of spirit, who's got the spirit of God, and that's Yoshua. Sorry, it's not going to be your son. So the whole thing is consistent with Rashi. But if you think about it here, the lad who comes to Moshe and says, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp, that was Gershom. And what was the prophecy? The prophecy was not that Moshe's dying. That's not what Gershom was bothered about, but the fact that Yoshua was going to take over, and not he, Gershom. So Moshe's then would be expected to be upset because he wanted his son to take over. So he says to Yoshua, don't worry about it. So it all fits in very nicely there. But my question about the tenses here, I think, still remains. And I think that the idea that Eldad and Medad were saying that Moshe is already dying, he is dead or dying, it's not a future tense, is a rebellion. That's like saying, when David HaMelech was on his deathbed, what happened? His son usurped his throne while he was still alive. And that was Mored B'Malchus. You can't do that. And so that's why Yoshua got so upset. I think that the fact that it's in the present tense is relevant. I also haven't seen it in any of the Meforshim, not that I can claim to have read all the Meforshim, but the ones I've read, I haven't read it. I haven't read it in there. So I'm writing it in Chidushei Poleg one day to be published.
If this was the prophecy, and so consequently Moshe knew that this is what was coming, why would he have been surprised 40 years later when he was told that he wasn't going to be doing it and that Yeshua would be doing it?
I'm not sure he was surprised. He was upset by it because he wanted to lead the people into the land. We know that because it says, he implored Hashem to let him. And I guess he would say, well, you know, there's been a prophecy, but there's chances that prophecies may not come true. We know that. A prophet, by the way, in Jewish thought, is not somebody who predicts the future. It's somebody who says the word of God. Now, if you think about Jeremiah, you think about Yeshaya, they prophesied that Jerusalem will be destroyed. And it was. So they were prophets in both sense, in the Christian sense, which is a prophet, meaning to predict the future, and in the Jewish sense, which is they're saying the words of God. Now, what about Jonah? We're coming up to Yom Kippur. We're going to read the state for Jonah, the book of Jonah. Jonah was a prophet, but he was a prophet in the Jewish sense, not a prophet in the Christian sense, because what did he prophesy? He was told to go to Nineveh and tell them that if you don't buck your eyes, ears up, you're going to get destroyed. And so he predicted the destruction of Nineveh in his prophecy. Did that happen? No. Why did it not happen?
Because they repented.
Because they repented. And so this is what Jonah was upset about. This is one of the explanations why Jonah ran away and went on the boat. He didn't want to go to Nineveh because he didn't want them to repent, and then he would be shown up as a false prophet. Prophecy can change, and because we're not talking about prophecy in that sort of particular way. So Moshe may well have known this prophecy, but he may have thought that there's something that I can do in my actions to change the events that have been, if you like, predicted to happen. But again, Moshe Rabbeinu is a human being. He will have had human emotions and will not really have wanted to take on board that. He, according to Rashi, desperately wanted his son to take over. It wasn't to be. He wasn't of the same caliber, and that's not what happened. So we have these three different opinions. Let's just say what they were. First one, we're not told who it is. Moshe's dying or dead, or is dying, will die, and Yeshua is going to be the leader. Second one, arise, Slav, quail. And the third one was the prophecy of the end of days, the great war of Gog and Magog. Okay, so that's where we got to. Now, what we did last week was we skipped
the word Shanayim, you know, for Shanim and Shanim, could that mean 2 years?
Well, then it would be Shnei Shanim, wouldn't it? You'd have it. So Shanim is plural, years.
Shavuayim is 2 weeks.
But what it means is, Bayamim Hahem Shanim, it means in those days, years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
But what Rav Nachman wants to say is, Bayamim Hahem, in those days, Shnayim, 2 of them. And as Julia points out, the only time that 2 of them did it together was Eldad and Medad.
How would you say 2 years in Ivrit, just out of interest?
Shnatayim.
Oh, Shnatayim, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So then we come to a bit of Gemarah that we did last week, which was a bit of we go back and say the pasuk said, and we did this last week. The pasuk in Bamidbar says that when the 70 elders got their prophecy, let's go and have a look at it. It's on the screen now. They prophesied, but then they stopped. They stopped, and we said last week that we didn't even notice that. Verse 25 on the screen, Jeffrey.
The Lord descended in the cloud and spoke to him, and he increased some of the spirit that was on him and bestowed it on the 70 elders. And when the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but they did not continue. Okay, so this last week we did the piece of Gemarah about this. They did not continue. Velo yasafu. That's what we did last week, even though it comes now, because I wanted
to do this particular bit that we've done today. I wanted to do that separately. So we're going to move on from that. We showed that the proof that they did not continue was because it was a past tense. Vayit naba'u. The 70 elders prophesied past tense, and with Eldad and Medad, it says mit naba'im in the present tense. So David Marks, the Gemarah here is particular about its tenses, and so I cite this as a proof for my idea that they should be particular about the tenses that they said earlier on as well.
So my answer to that was, here is a direct quote from the Torah, which uses biblical Hebrew, whereas the first interpretation in being in the present tense is post-biblical Hebrew. Okay,
I'll accept that as a partial answer, but it's still in the present tense.
No, I agree, but it's again we've got the same problem with the translations of Steinsaltz and Art Scroll.
Okay,
why are they translating?
I don't have to agree with their translations. Am I allowed to say that?
Absolutely. You're the Maggid Shiur. You can say exactly what you want.
Okay, so let's go on.
And you proved your point as well.
Thank you. Right, let's go on in the Gemarah, because having it's all out of order, this Gemarah. That bit that we did last week should have been before the bit that we did this week, which is why I did it before that, because what the bit that we've done this week now is carried on over here. And the Gemarah is now going to dissect the three different opinions of what the prophecy was. And it goes like this. The Gemarah says, Bishlama lemanda amar. It's okay, it fits, from the word shalom. There is peace. It's fine. It fits according to the one who said the prophecy was that Moshe is going to die and Yeshua is going to take over. Hainu dichtiv, because it's written, Adoni Moshe kala'im. Yeshua said, my master Moses imprisoned them or destroy them. Actually, the Steinsaltz translates it as imprison them, and the Art Scroll translates it as destroy them. Okay, and both translations actually have a support, because who knows what the word for prison is in modern Hebrew? Yes, come on, Julia, it's on the tip of your tongue.
No, it isn't. I know it's bet something or other, and I think it begins with a P, but I can't remember it.
Internment. It didn't say an internment something or other. It's an internment. I've seen it the other day on the Route 4 road.
Yeah, David?
Bet Keller.
Bet Keller.
Okay.
Keller means a cell. If you come to one of our shul meetings, where from time to time we invite the ladies to tell us what they would like to do with the ladies area and the mechitza, and we have one of our perennial rows about whether the mechitza should be open or closed, you will find that there are very vociferous ladies in our community who say, I do not want to be in a keller. I don't want to be in a cell. They feel that they are locked up in a cell when the mechitza is closed, and they're enclosed in a keller. And they say, I'm not a dog. I don't want to be in a keller. Keller is a cell, a prison cell. And that's the same word. And that's why the Steinsaltz, and in fact, most translations, translate it as imprison them. Kala'im, put them in a keller, put them in a cell, put them in a prison. But the another translation of the word kaf lamed aleph is to destroy. It means to destroy as well. So the Art Scroll translates it here. I have it in front of me. Where is it? He says, Adoni Moshe, my master Moses, destroy them. That's what it says in the Art Scroll, which is a bit even more harsh than put them in prison. So anyway, he says that, and the Gemara says it works. That works. The fact that Yoshua got upset and on Moshe's behalf and told Moshe to destroy them fits with the first version of the prophecy, which is that they were saying Moshe's gonna die or Moshe is already dead, whichever way you want to look at it. Says the Gemara, Ella, but Leman Amar Hanach Tarte, according to the other two opinions, one of which was arise, quail, and the third one was a prophecy about the end of days, the war of Gog and Magog. My Adoni Moshe Kla'ein. What's that got to do with it? Why did Yoshua tell Moshe to destroy them or put them in prison? One thing's got nothing to do with the other. And here we get the answer, not the answer that Julia gave, but the answer that Julia gave would have been a good answer. The Gemara says, you know why Yoshua told Moshe to imprison them or destroy them? Not because of what they said, but because Delav Orach Ara, because they did not behave in a proper way. Now, you could say, what was it the proper way they didn't behave? You could give Julia's answer. And that is, Moshe said, come to the ballot box, and they didn't come. That's not a way to behave. If Moshe Rabbeinu tells you to do something, you jolly well do it. And if you don't do it, then you are worthy of, Moshe was in effect the king. You've rebelled against the king. We know, don't we, from our Shmuel Aleph Shiurim, that when you rebel against the king, what's the punishment? The death penalty. Yeah. So they've not behaved appropriately. So Julia's explanation would work very nicely. It's not the one the Gemara gives. The Gemara gives a different explanation of their bad behavior. What was their bad behavior? Dehavale ketalmid hamoreh halacha lifnei rabo. They have behaved like a talmid. What's a talmid?
Student.
A student. Hamoreh halacha, who teaches halacha lifnei rabo, in front of his Rebbe. So you've got your Rebbe there. There's a halacha. We learned this halacha, actually, by the way, back in Sanhedrin many, many, many months ago. We learned this halacha, that you're not allowed to give a psak halacha in front of your Rebbe. And do you remember the Gemara said some opinions are you're not allowed to give a psak halacha if your Rebbe is in the city. Remember I told you that if I went to Yerushalayim and somebody asked me a shaila, technically according to that Gemara, I wouldn't be able to give an answer because my Rebbe that gave me smicha lives in Yerushalayim. And that's an opinion that says you can't do that, even if he's in the city. Everybody says that if you're in front of your Rebbe, you cannot give a psak halacha, you cannot teach halacha. And so according to this opinion, what was it that Yoshua was getting so upset about? Was that Eldad and Medad were prophesying in front of the great prophet. Lo kam Yisrael ke Moshe od Navi. There'll never be another prophet like Moshe. These two schnips, Eldad and Medad, had no right to be going prophesying while Moshe's around. That's a chutzpah. It's like a student who teaches halacha in his Rebbe's presence, which is inappropriate. You're not allowed to do it. So that is the explanation of the other two versions of the prophecy as to why Yehoshua got so upset. Okay, we're going to stop there because we're out of time. But what we're going to do next week, don't look on if you don't want to have a spoiler, is we're going to ask some more questions about this prophecy, and we're going to turn the question on its head. We just now asked a question and said, I understand what the first prophecy, Moshe's dead and Yeshua is going to take us into the land. That fits nicely. But what about the other two? We're going to ask a question next week. against the first prophecy. We're going to say certain things are okay according to the other two prophecies, but what about the first one? It doesn't fit in with something. And you'll have to wait till next week to see what it is that doesn't fit in. So, any questions as to what we have done today? Let's just summarize. We have given the three different opinions as to what the prophecy of Eldad and Medad were. We've given three different opinions. We've had a Chidushei Poleg that says the present tense was used rather than the future tense, and that's what got Yoshua so upset. We've spoken about the Rashi that says the Na'ar, the youth that reported back, was in fact Gershom, and that fits in with the Rashi over there where when Moshe is told that he's going to die. And we have asked a question as to why it would be that Yoshua would get so upset with the second and third versions of the prophecy. And we had another Chidushei Poleg from Julia that says it was because they never showed up to the ballot box when they were told to do so by Moshe Rabbeinu. So we have filled 2 pages in our Chidushei Poleg book today, which is excellent. Any questions? No questions. Jolly good. Right. We'll see you next week, please God.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye, Johnny.